Hello students, I'm Akriti Garg and welcome to my YouTube channel Pharma Scholarite, where you will be able to learn about different concepts of pharmacology. In the current presentation, I'm going to discuss about the pathophysiology and pharmacotherapy of peptic ulcer. The agenda for this presentation are introduction, types, etiology, pathophysiology, symptoms, risk factors, complications, regulation of gastric acid secretion, diagnosis, and the treatment of peptic ulcer. The peptic ulcers are the open sores that develop on the inside lining of esophagus, stomach, and or the upper portion of small intestine, that is duodenum. Normally, a thick layer of mucus protects the stomach lining from the effect of its digestive juices. However, some situations reduces the protective layer, thus causing ulcers. Overall, there is decrease in the incidence of peptic ulcer disease worldwide due to improved hygienic and sanitary conditions, as it prevents infection with H. pylori responsible for peptic ulcer disease, combined with the effective treatment and judicious use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that is NSAIDs, as due to their acidic property, they erode protective layer in stomach, leading to peptic ulcer diseases. Now, coming on to type of peptic ulcer, depending upon their location, peptic ulcers are of three types. First type is esophageal ulcer. Esophageal ulcer is present in the esophagus part of GIT. Next one is gastric ulcer. It is present in the stomach. And third one is duodenal ulcer, present in the upper portion of small intestine, that is duodenum. Esophageal ulcers develop inside the esophagus, most commonly caused due to H. pylori, eradication of mucus lining, and or gastroesophageal reflux disease. In this disease, due to improper functioning of cardiac sphincter, there is reflux of acid present in the stomach to esophagus, causing destructive effect on the lining and ultimately leading to ulcer. Gastric ulcers occur inside the stomach. In gastric ulcer, generally, acid secretion is normal or low, while deficient mucosal defense plays a greater role. There, that is, there is decreased secretion of mucus layer. Duodenal ulcers occur inside the upper portion of small intestine, that is duodenum. In duodenal ulcer, acid secretion is high in about half of the patients but normal in the rest. Peptic ulcer can occur at any age. However, there is some difference between the gastric ulcers and duodenal ulcers. Duodenal ulcer usually appear between 30 to 50 years of age and are more common in men as compared to women, while stomach ulcers tend to occur later in life, that is, after 60 years of age, and affect women more often than men. Additionally, duodenal ulcers are 4 times more common than gastric ulcers. Now, coming on to its etiology or the cause of peptic ulcer, most commonly peptic ulcer is caused due to infection with H. pylori, followed by use of some medications, and least commonly due to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. First one, let's discuss about H. pylori. Helicobacter pylori is a gram-negative bacillus that is found within the gastric epithelial cells. This bacterium is responsible for 90% of duodenal ulcers and 70% to 90% of gastric ulcers. There are some virulence factors present with the bacterium which allows it to adhere to gastric mucosa, causing inflammation and ulcer. These virulence factors involve an enzyme known as urease. This enzyme breaks urea into ammonia, protecting the bacteria from the acidic environment of stomach. Next virulence factor is toxins produced by the bacterium and flagella present, which allows its movement towards gastric epithelium. There are various medications such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, corticosteroids, biphosphates, potassium chloride, steroids, fluorouracil, aspirin, anticoagulants, which increases the chances of peptic ulcer disease. NSAIDs are the second most commonly cause of peptic ulcer, followed by H. pylori. NSAIDs inhibit an enzyme COX-1 which is responsible for prostaglandins, a protective mechanism of stomach, resulting in decrease of gastric mucosa and bicarbonate ions causing peptic ulcer. Lastly, there is a rare cause of peptic ulcer disease is a condition called Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, also known as gastrinoma, in which stomach acid is produced in higher than normal amounts. A gastrinoma is a tumor of acid-producing cells of stomach that increases acid output. Next, regarding the pathophysiology, basically, the peptic ulcer results due to the imbalance between aggressive factors and defensive factors in the stomach. There is decrease in defensive factors such as gastric mucus, bicarbonate secretion, prostaglandins, and blood flow to mucosa, whereas there is increase in aggressive factors such as acid, pepsin, and H. pylori. Next, there are various symptoms of peptic ulcer present in different types of patients. There may be slight pain due to ulcer, which may be confused by the hunger, thus leading to unexplained hunger in the patient. However, duodenal ulcer pain is relieved by the food. However, gastric ulcer pain is further elevated due to presence of food, which may lead to loss of appetite and unexplained weight loss. Abdominal bloating may occur due to blockage of GIT by the inflammation caused due to ulcer. Heartburn, vomiting, and fatty food intolerance can be seen in patients. Stool discoloration occurs due to internal bleeding and presence of blood in the stool due to ulcer. The risk factors causing peptic ulcer are smoking, drinking, alcohol as they irritate mucosal lining causing its damage. Further, family history of ulcer, some other diseases, age, stress, and eating spicy food may also be the risk factors for PUD, that is peptic ulcer diseases. Next, the complications of peptic ulcer disease include internal bleeding, which may lead to anemia, and presence of blood in vomiting or stools. Secondly, peptic ulcer perforate the walls of stomach and small intestine, thus putting the patient at the risk of infections. Further, due to inflammation, peptic ulcer may block the passage of food through the GIT, causing obstruction, bloating, vomiting, and even weight loss. Now, I'm going to discuss about the regulation of gastric acid secretion to understand the treatment of peptic ulcer better. When we intake food, the food either stimulates G cells or vagus nerve. When food stimulates vagus nerve, it releases acetylcholine. Further, acetylcholine acts on the receptors nicotinic receptor or muscarinic receptor of ganglionic cell of enteric nervous system. After the stimulation, ganglionic cell releases gastrin-releasing peptide and acetylcholine. Acetylcholine and GRP stimulates G cells to release gastrin. This gastrin acts on the CCK2 receptor at ECL cell or parietal cell. Next, the ACH released by the ganglionic cell act on the muscarinic receptors present on ECL cell or parietal cell. Next, this gastrin and ACH, after binding to their receptors present on ECL cell, stimulates the release of histamine. Then this histamine acts on a receptor, that is H2 receptors present on parietal cells. M3 and H2 receptors further act by the secondary messengers known as CAMP, and CCK2 receptor act by secondary messenger phospholipid C IP3 DAC pathway. This mobilizes intracellular calcium ions. Due to mobilization of calcium ions, there is a pump known as H positive K positive ATPases. They get activated, due to which H positive is released in the lumen, whereas K positive from the lumen enters the parietal cell. Now we'll see how these H positive ions actually formed. In our body, there is already presence of water and carbon dioxide. Water and carbon dioxide combine in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme to form H2CO3. H2CO3 dissociates to form HCO3 negative and H positive. Thus formed H positive is released in the lumen with the help of H positive K positive ATPase pump. Now, these are all about the aggressive factors, that is production of acid. Now we'll see about the defensive factor. In our body, there is production of prostaglandins, PGE2. These prostaglandins act on EP3 receptor present on the parietal cell. This EP3 receptor inhibits secondary messenger CAMP and hence inhibit the production of H positive in the stomach. Now, using this pathway, we can see where the drug should act to inhibit the peptic ulcer. Either we can block this cholinergic receptor, histaminic receptor, or the effect of gastrin. We'll study about the treatment of peptic ulcer in following slides. Next, coming on to diagnosis. The diagnosis of peptic ulcer can be done through patient history taking. If the person complains about epigastric abdominal pain, early satiety, fullness, weight loss, or complications related to peptic ulcer, then we can think that the person may have ulcer, and further examination can be done. Second method is esophagogastroduodenoscopy or endoscopic biopsy. In endoscopy, a thin tube with camera is inserted through mouth, which is used to visualize peptic ulcer in the stomach and duodenum. This method is very reliable to visually detect the ulcer presence in the GIT. Next method is urea breath test, used to examine the presence of H. pylori infections. In this method, labeled 13C or 14C urea is ingested by the patient. Due to activity of urease in H. pylori, there is the release of 13C and 14C labeled carbon dioxide through lungs, which is tested. This method is very specific and reliable. Next, coming on to treatment of peptic ulcer diseases, the goal of therapy remains to relieve the pain because ulcers are very painful. So first goal is to relieve the pain of the patient. Next, the goal is to prevent complications due to ulcers such as bleeding, perforation, obstruction, etc. Next, the goal is prevention of relapse, that is reoccurring of ulcers, to prevent the reoccurring of ulcers. And the last but not the least, to ultimately treat the ulcer or heal the ulcer. Next, there are various drugs used for the treatment. Now we'll study them category wise. First is the drugs which reduce gastric acid secretion. Now this subcategory includes H2 antihistamines. The drugs are cimetidine, ranitidine, famotidine, and roxatidine. Next category is proton pump inhibitors. The drugs included are omeprazole, lansoprazole, pantoprazole, rabeprazole. Next is anticholinergic drugs. Examples: pyrazipine, propanthenol, oxyphenone. Next is prostaglandin analogs such as misoprostol. Next category is the drugs which neutralize gastric acid, which are also known as antacids. There are two types of antacids. First is systemic and second one is non-systemic. As the name suggests, systemic are those which are absorbed in the blood. However, non-systemic are those which are not absorbed in the blood. Example of systemic are sodium bicarbonate and sodium citrate. The examples for non-systemic first type is buffer type. Example: aluminum hydroxide gel, magnesium trisilicate, megaldrate. Non-buffer type includes magnesium hydroxide, calcium carbonate, and miscellaneous includes alginate and simethicone. The drugs used as ulcer protectives are sucralfate, colloidal bismuth subcitrate, also known as CBS. Anti-H. pylori drugs include amoxicillin, clarithromycin, metronidazole, tinidazole, and tetracycline. First, coming on to H2 antihistamines, these are the first class of highly effective drugs of peptic ulcer disease because, as we have seen in the regulation of acid secretion, we have seen that H2 receptors play a major role in the production of H positive in the stomach. So we can block that H2 receptor to inhibit acid production in the stomach. Mechanism of action include they competitively block H2 receptors present on parietal cell, thus preventing gastric acid secretion. Second one is they inhibit gastric acid secretion in all phases but majorly inhibit nocturnal gastric acid secretion. They reduce gastric acid secretion stimulated by acetylcholine, gastrin, food, etc. The pharmacokinetics of various H2 antihistamines are displayed in the table. You can follow up for this. Next, uses of H2 antihistamines are they are used to treat duodenal ulcers, gastric ulcers, stress ulcer and gastritis, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, gastroesophageal reflux disease, prophylaxis of aspiration pneumonia, and urticaria. In urticaria, H2 antihistamines are used where the person does not respond to H1 antihistamines. The adverse effects of H2 antihistamines include headache, dizziness, bowel upset, dry mouth, and rashes. Cimetidine particularly, but not other H2 blockers, has anti-androgenic action. That is, it, it displaces dihydrotestosterone from its cytoplasmic receptors, increases plasma prolactin, and inhibits degradation of estradiol by liver. High doses given for longer periods produces gynecomastia, loss of libido, impotence, and temporary decrease in sperm count. The interaction of H2 antihistamines include cimetidine inhibit several cytochrome P450 isoenzymes and reduces hepatic blood flow. It inhibits the metabolism of many drugs so that they can accumulate to toxic levels. Example: theophylline, phenytoin, carbamazepine, phenobarbital, sulfonylureas, metronidazole, warfarin, imipramine, lidocaine, nifedipine, and quinidine. Metabolism of propranolol and diazepam is also retarded, but this may not be clinically significant. Antacids reduce absorption of all H2 blockers. When used concurrently, a gap of 2 hours should be allowed. Ketoconazole absorption is decreased by H2 blockers due to reduced gastric acidity. Next, coming on to proton pump inhibitors. These are the most potent suppressors of gastric acid secretion, and these are most commonly and most widely used nowadays against peptic ulcer diseases. At typical doses, they reduces 80 to 95% of acid production in stomach. Its mechanism of action include PPIs are prodrugs which require acid for activation. They diffuses into parietal cells and get activated. The activated form covalently binds to H positive, K positive ATPases, thus irreversibly inactivating the proton pump. Acid secretion resumes only after the synthesis of new proton pump, prolonging the suppression of acid production, that is up to 24 to 48 hours. Pharmacokinetics of PPIs include all PPIs are administered orally in enteric coated form to protect them from molecular transformation in the gastric juices. Once in small intestine, PPIs are absorbed rapidly. They are highly protein bound and are rapidly metabolized by hepatic CYP, particularly CYP2, C19 and CYP3A4. The uses include peptic ulcer. In peptic ulcer, 20 mg OD of omeprazole is used. In bleeding peptic ulcer, pantoprazole 40 to 120 mg per day or rabeprazole 40 mg or 80 mg per day can be used. In stress ulcer, intravenous pantoprazole or rabeprazole can be used. Omeprazole is used in gastroesophageal reflux disease. It is also used in prophylaxis of aspiration pneumonia, and 60 to 120 mg per day of omeprazole is used in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Adverse effects include nausea, loose stools, headache, abdominal pain, muscle and joint pain, dizziness are accompanied by 3 to 5% of patients. Rashes, 1.5% of incidences, leukopenia, and hepatic dysfunction are infrequent. In prolonged treatment, atopic gastritis has been reported occasionally. Its interactions include bioavailability of all PPIs is reduced by food. They should be taken in empty stomach, followed by 1 hour later by meals to activate H positive, K positive ATPases and making it more susceptible to PPIs. Omeprazole inhibit oxidation of certain drugs such as diazepam, phenytoin, and warfarin levels may be increased. It interferes with activation of clopidogrel by inhibiting CYP2 C19. Reduced gastric acidity decreases absorption of ketoconazole and iron salts. Clarithromycin inhibits omeprazole metabolism and increases its plasma concentration. Chronic use of PPIs are also associated with increased risk of bone fractures. Next category is anticholinergics. The M1 muscarinic receptor antagonist pyrazipine 100 to 150 mg per day and telinzipine can reduce 40 to 50% of acid production. These drugs are believed to suppress neural stimulation of acid production via muscarinic receptor of intramural ganglia. However, due to their poor efficacy, undesirable anticholinergic side effects, and rise of blood disorders, they are rarely used nowadays. Next are prostaglandin analogs. Mechanism of action includes PGE2 and PGI2 are produced in gastric mucosa and have a cytoprotective role by inhibiting acid secretion by opposing CAMP generation in parietal cell and gastrin release from antral G cells, as we have already seen in the diagram. Next, they promote mucus as well as HCO3 negative secretion, which are defensive factors present in the stomach. They shield the mucosa from attack of pepsin. They also increase mucosal blood flow, which help in the healing of stomach lining. Next, natural PGs have very short T-half, that is, they have very short half-life. Thus, their duration of action are also very low. Misoprostol, also known as methyl PGE1 ester, 200 micrograms QID. It is longer-acting synthetic PGE1 derivative which inhibits acid output dose dependently. Reduction in 24-hour acid production is less than H2 blockers because of shorter duration of action, that is 3 hours. It is poor in relieving ulcer pain. Some patients may even complain of increased pain during the first week of therapy. It is rarely used nowadays because PPIs are more effective, more convenient, and better tolerated and cheaper. Diarrhea, abdominal cramps, uterine bleeding, abortion, and need for multiple daily doses are the various adverse effects of prostaglandin analogs. Patient acceptability is also poor. Prevention and treatment of NSAID-associated gastrointestinal injury and blood loss are the uses of prostaglandin analogs. Next, coming on to antacids. These are basic substances which neutralize gastric acid and raise the pH of gastric content. The potency of an antacid is generally expressed in terms of its acid neutralizing capacity, that is ANC, which is defined as number of millimole equivalent of one normal HCl that are brought to pH 3.5 in 15 minutes or 16 minutes in some cases by a unit dose of antacid preparation. This takes into consideration the rate at which antacid dissolves and reacts with HCl. This is important because a single dose of any antacid taken in empty stomach acts for 30 to 60 minutes only. Since in this time any gastric content is passed on to duodenum, taken with meals, antacid may act for at most 2 to 3 hours. Systemic antacids. First, sodium bicarbonate. It is water soluble, acts instantaneously, it has shorter duration of action, it is a potent neutralizer, that is 1 gram neutralizes 12 MEq of HCl. pH may rise above 7. Acid rebound can occur. Rebound means then reoccurrence of acid production or more production of acid after the treatment. Uses to treat heartburn, to alkaline urine, to treat acidosis. Its adverse effects include absorbed systematically, therefore large dose will induce alkalosis, means rise of pH of blood. It produces carbon dioxide in stomach, which may cause distension, discomfort, belching, and risk of ulcer perforation. Increases sodium load, thus may worsen edema and congestive heart failure. Its interactions include disturbs pharmacokinetics of other drugs, example thyroid hormone, allopurinol, imidazole, by altering gastric and urinary pH. Now coming on to non-systemic antacids, these are poorly absorbed in GIT, do not alter systemic acid-base balance, do not elevate urinary pH. Magnesium hydroxide has low water solubility, is efficacious antacid, and rebound acidity is mild and brief. Magnesium trisilicate is low solubility and reactivity. 1 gram can react with 1 MEq acid. About 5% of administered magnesium is absorbed systematically, thus may cause problem if renal function is inadequate. All magnesium salts have a laxative action. Soluble magnesium salts are used as osmotic purgatives. Aluminium hydroxide gel, it is bland, weak, and slowly reacting antacid. 5 ml of its suspension may neutralize 1-MEQ HCl. Megaldrate. It is a hydrated complex of hydroxymagnesium aluminate that initially reacts rapidly with acid and releases alum hydrox, which then reacts more slowly. Its ANC is 28 milliequivalent HCl per gram. Calcium carbonate. Potent and rapidly acting acid neutralizer, the calcium ions are partially absorbed. Antacid combinations. A combination of two or more antacid is frequently used. Why? It has various benefits, such as fast acting, such as magnesium hydroxide, and slow acting alum hydroxide. Acting components yield prompt as well as sustained effects. Magnesium salts are laxative, while alum salts are constipating. Thus, bowel movement is least affected. If alum salts and magnesium or calcium salts are used together, what will happen? Aluminium salts will delay gastric emptying, while magnesium and calcium salts hasten it. Thus, gastric emptying is least effective. Dose of individual components is reduced, thus reducing systemic toxicity. The adverse effects of antacids are calcium ions may diffuse into gastric mucosa, which increases HCl and gastrin secretion. Calcium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate liberates carbon dioxide in stomach, therefore can cause distension and discomfort. Acid rebound may also occur. The aluminium ions relax smooth muscles, thus it delays gastric emptying, causing constipation. Interactions are aluminum hydroxide binds phosphate in the intestine and prevents its absorption, which may cause hypophosphatemia. Decreases absorption of tetracycline, iron salts, fluoroquinolones, ketoconazole, H2 blockers, diazepam, phenothiazines, indomethacin, phenytoin, isoniazid, ethambutol, and nitrofurantoin by raising gastric pH. Now, talking about the ulcer protectives, first is sucralfate. It is a basic aluminium salt of sulfated sucrose. Mechanism of action is it polymerizes at pH less than 4 by crossing linking of molecules, forming a sticky gel-like consistency and preferentially and strongly adhere to ulcer base, especially duodenal ulcer, thus acting as a physical barrier preventing acid, pepsin, and bile from coming in contact with ulcer base, thus protecting it from further degradation. Dietary proteins get deposited on this coat, forming another layer, that is the protective layer. Augmented gastric mucosal prostaglandin synthesis may supplement physical protective action of sucralfate. Sucralfate has no acid neutralizing action but delays gastric emptying. Sucralfate is minimally absorbed after oral administration. Its action is entirely local. It promotes healing of both duodenal as well as gastric ulcers. Healing efficacy has been found similar to cimetidine at 4 weeks and may be superior in patients who continue to smoke. However, sucralfate is infrequently used now because of need of 4 large well-timed daily doses and availability of simple and more effective H2 blockers or PPIs. The dose is the ulcer healing dose of sucralfate is 1 gram taken in empty stomach 1 hour before the 3 major meals and at bedtime for 4 to 8 weeks. Uses are it is used in bile reflux, gastritis, and prophylaxis of stress ulcer. Topically, it is used on burns, bed sores, diabetic or radiation ulcers, excoriated skin, etc. as a protective. Its side effects are constipation is reported by 2% patients. It has potential for dry mouth and nausea are infrequent. Interactions are antacids should not be taken with sucralfate because its polymerization is dependent on acidic pH. It may induce hypophosphatemia by binding phosphate ions in the intestine. Interaction sucralfate absorbs many drugs and interferes with the absorption of tetracyclines, fluoroquinolones, cimetidine, phenytoin, and digoxin. Colloidal bismuth substrate. It is water-soluble but precipitates at pH less than 5. Most of the ingested CBS passes in the feces. Small amounts absorbed are excreted in urine. It is not an antacid but heals 60% of ulcers at 4 weeks and 80 to 90% at 8 weeks. Its possible mechanism of action is it may increase gastric mucosal prostaglandins, mucus, and bicarbonate ion production. It may precipitate mucus glycoproteins and coat the ulcer base. It may detach and inhibit H. pylori directly. Its uses are gastritis and non-ulcer dyspepsia associated with H. pylori are also improved by CBS. Presently, it is used occasionally as a component of triple drug anti-H. pylori regimen. 120 mg as BI203 half an hour before 3 major meals and at bedtime for 4 to 8 weeks. Its side effects are diarrhea, headache, and dizziness. Blackening of tongue, dentures, and stools can also be there. Its interaction is with milk and antacid should not be taken concomitantly. The last one is anti-H. pylori drugs. For ulcers caused by H. pylori, treatment requires a combination of medications. The goal of treatment are to kill the bacteria in the body, reduce the amount of acid in the stomach, and protect the lining of stomach and intestine. Standard therapy today is called triple therapy because it requires taking 2 antibiotics and 1 acid suppressing medications for 1 to 2 weeks, as shown in the table below. References. In case you have any query, you can pen down in comment section below, or you may reach me at pharmascholarite@gmail.com. The link for slide is provided in the description box. Also, if you liked my video, then don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit on the bell icon to remain updated for further videos. Thank you.